Hello and welcome to another edition of Sri's Sunday New York Times Read Along. Our guest this week is Tom Jolly, New York Times Associate Masthead Editor who oversees production of the newspaper. Our host, of course, is Sri Srinivasan, Managing Director for ASU's Cronkite School of Journalism's Cronkite Pro, starting July 1st. And co-founder of Digimentors, a digital and virtual events consultancy. My name is Neil Parekh. I am the executive producer and guest host of Sri's Sunday New York Times Read Along. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, our Digimentors website, and we'd also like to welcome everyone watching on Tom's Twitter account. Tom, thank you so much for letting us go live directly to your channel. Please like, please comment, please share. Please let us know where you're watching from. Tag your friends. This is going to be a great discussion. We're going to cover recent front pages, a special section on Haiti. We'll talk to Tom about all aspects of producing the paper. But before we do that, let's definitely give you a little preview of what's to come. And after that, we'll welcome our guests and bring on Sri Srinivasan. Our guest on this year's Father's Day edition of Sri's Sunday New York Times Read Along is Tom Jolly, an associate masthead editor for the New York Times, who oversees production of the newspaper. This is Tom's third appearance on the show. In 2019, before the pandemic, we read the paper with him at his kitchen table. In 2020, just after the pandemic shut everything down, he joined us on Father's Day and told us about how the New York Times was putting out the paper with very few people in the office. Earlier this week, Dean Baquet stepped down as executive editor of the New York Times, and Joe Kahn stepped in. Tom will share his thoughts on the continued transformation of the Times and the move to live coverage on a global scale. We'll also review some notable front pages and special print sections, including the shooting in Uvalde, Texas, the New York Times coverage of the 1 millionth COVID death, and the recent special report on the ransom Haiti has paid France over the past 200 years. Sri Srinivasan is our host. I am the executive producer and occasional guest host, Neil Parekh. Paula Kiger helps produce the show, engaging with the audience on Facebook and LinkedIn. Sri has been hosting the New York Times Read Along for 6.5 years, with some amazing guests. The show is produced by Digimentors. We produce high-quality virtual and hybrid events for organizations big and small around the world. We also do social and digital consulting, training, and workshops. Again, Tom Jolly, the print editor of the New York Times, is our guest. Live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and our Digimentors website. There we go. That gives you a bit of a preview of what's to come. And of course, I should have started by wishing everyone a happy Father's Day. Thank you for sharing a little bit of your morning for us. We're particularly thankful that Tom is joining us on Father's Day. So with that, we want to welcome a few of the folks who are watching who have already checked in. So let's take a quick look at that around the horn. We have Doug Levy watching from Southern California. Doug, thank you as always. Waking up early your time. My mom is watching from Hastings-on-Hudson, New York. Hi, Mom. Always good to see you. And thank you for wishing everyone a Father's Day. Happy Father's Day, Sujana Chandrasekhar, Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar. Wishing everyone a happy Father's Day. And of course, today is also Juneteenth. We'll take a look at some of the Times' special coverage for Juneteenth in a little bit later in the show. Jonathan Borstein is watching from the East Village. Jonathan, always great to see you. Deborah Kerr is watching from Fort Lauderdale. Thank you, Deborah. We have Patricia Freudenberg watching as well, and Diana Rohini is watching from stormy Cape Cod. Therese, bonjour, and watching from Massachusetts this Sunday morning. Therese, that's great. We have who else do we have? Paul Suri is watching, and it does. He makes a point. Anyone can be a father, but it takes a special person to be a dad. We certainly agree. Our friend Stephen Kaplan is watching. I know you're in Ramsey, New Jersey, Stephen, unless you're out there by the Swans over at the lake. Ted Coltman is in Washington, D.C. Naomi Service is watching from the Upper West Side. And our friend Rose Horowitz is watching. She hosts a great show, Women to Follow. You should follow her and check out Women to Follow. And we will now get ready to bring on our host, Sri Srinivasan. Sri, welcome. How are you doing this Father's Day?
Happy Father's Day, Neil. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing well. I'm doing
It's
well. It
because
must be great. You have your kids back in town, right, from college?
I do, and it's wonderful to have them here. And because it's Father's Day, we're able to put this show together. And this is what you and I wanted for Father's Day. It was the ability to do this show. As we always, we want to thank our families for supporting us, and Paula's too for giving us the space to do this every Sunday, folks, at 8:30 a.m. Eastern till 10 a.m. And if you miss it live, it runs immediately on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and on LinkedIn. And I also want to just tell everyone that there's a special Father's Day connection to this show, because the reason Neil does this, and he decided to help me once I was doing this for a couple of years, is because his father, who is a publisher of an Indian newspaper in New York, was a big fan of not just all newspapers, but also of the print New York Times, and he asked to be cremated with a copy of the Sunday New York Times. Every time I tell that story, I get goosebumps. I know Neil does too. His father has passed now for almost a dozen years, but his spirit is with us. And a big shout out to Prakash and to all fathers and father figures in everyone's lives. And I know for some folks, Father's Day is difficult because of their own difficult relationships with their fathers. So we're thinking and sending you support as well. Our friend Paula reminded us of that just this morning. We have so much to talk about, and we have a fantastic guest. Normally, I preview the paper, a little bit of the paper before the guest comes on, but our guest is the print editor of the New York Times. So it would make much more sense to have him preview the paper with us together. So we're so excited to have you all with us. Please hit share right now. Please tag a friend. They can watch live or later. Anybody who's interested in the news, interested in fighting misinformation and disinformation, will love this show. So let's put up our card and remind you of our guest. It's great. Tom Jolly is with us. He is the New York Times Associate Masthead Editor who oversees production of the print newspaper. We're so delighted to have him with us. And so let's say hi.
Happy Father's Day, Sergey. Thanks for
Happy
the invitation.
Happy Father's Day to you, and thank you so much for being with us and giving us part of your Father's Day. We want to tell everyone that this is the third time you've been with us. One of them, the first time, was at your home with our friend Carla Baranakis. She brought bagels, and to read, as Neil and I got to read the Sunday New York Times at the home of the print editor of the New York Times, was something extra special, a life highlight, as I like to say. And there we are. This was in the early production days. We were just off a phone camera. Now we're much more sophisticated setup. We now have a business where we help produce shows like this, but you were there in the early days, Tom, and thank you so much for that. And then you came back on Father's Day during the pandemic. So thank you.
My pleasure. We love you guys. We really appreciate the discussions about the times, and the story, as you said, about Neil's father is something that's gives me goosebumps as well.
And you, as you know, over the years, so many people who love the Times tell you that you folks are running an ad campaign, right, where you have people who've been subscribers for many years. I think The longest I've seen is in about 40 years or so, but there might be people, many people in that range. I've been a subscriber for about 27 years, I think, 28. I need to check.
And we just launched a new campaign featuring Questlove, who's a fairly recent subscriber, 2020, I believe it is, but obviously a high profile one.
And I'm so glad to hear that. So tell us what the print editor of the New York Times does. Your title is more sophisticated and complicated than that, but you basically edit the print paper.
Well, so I basically manage a group of people who do that work. Really, we have a team of about 60 full-time people who do all parts of the paper. There's a group of designers and a group of editors, all of them just fantastically talented, and more talented than me, that's for sure, at what they do. And so what they do every day is work with the reporting desks, whose main focus now is to publish their material on our digital report. And our folks work with those reporting desks and pick out the most compelling, I guess I'll say, stories. In many cases, the most important, but oftentimes also just stories that are very interesting and involve a lot of work and creativity in terms of thinking of ideas of how to tell. The heirloom story is an example of that, for instance, that we'll talk about in a little bit. But and so we have a fantastic design team, and as I said, a fantastic editing team that writes all the headlines, makes the stories fit, writes all the display type, and as a group figures out what's going to be in the paper each day.
And how has you've given us a little bit of clue about how some of that has changed. What are some of the biggest changes in the time that you've been supervising this process?
Well, I mean, the most enormous change is that we created a print hub, which is this group of people whose primary responsibility is to publish the newspaper. Of course, before that was created, everybody was responsible for producing the newspaper, and we had a few people who focused on producing the digital report. But obviously, the digital report has the capability of reaching readers all around the world. It's also, the growth part of the business, and so we wanted to find a way to continue to create a great first-class newspaper while freeing up the reporting desks and putting more resources into creating an innovative and compelling digital report. When we first started talking about this, I think we all sort of imagined text being sent out to our digital readers and then taking that text and putting it into the paper. Well, the plan, so to speak, has worked so well that now we're doing so many innovative things on the digital side with videos, interactives, bursts, we call them, where we use a series of photos to tell a story more than we use words. And the innovations just continue to come. So what's happened is our folks, in particular our designers, have been challenged to kind of deconstruct a lot of those things to make them work for the newspaper. So almost every day there's a project that's gone out on our digital report that involved all these different elements that you can use for digital, and we've found ways to make them work in a great way for print. The other thing that's happened is that because there's so much emphasis on visual presentations online, the newspaper has become much more visual as well, which I think has been a great thing for the paper. Of course, the nickname for the paper is the Gray Lady, but we're anything but that anymore. We have fantastic photography teams. We have an amazing graphics group, and we want to use the work that those folks do in a big way in print as well as on the digital report.
And we'll see some of those innovations and ideas when we look through the paper in just a minute. But I did want to ask you about some of the things going on at the Times. Can you tell us about the growth of subscriptions and how that is working? You know, the digital subscriptions. How is the print paper itself and the subscription, the way the readership is going? How is that? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. First, on the digital side, one of the things that the company has done as a matter of strategy is to look for ways to not only add readership through the NY Times site, but through all the other sort of pieces of the site, or we have puzzles that people can subscribe for puzzles. We have Wirecutter. You can subscribe to Wirecutter. And the company recently bought The Athletic, which is also something you can subscribe to separately. But the idea is that ultimately we're looking at having bundles of, so that you can subscribe to a bundle of content, different types of content. And, it's a little bit like the model of a cable or a streaming service, I guess, if you like. Where you can pick and choose what you want, but ultimately we hope you'll subscribe to it all, and that includes the print newspaper. Print, as you know, is it's not a secret that there are a lot of challenges to print going forward, and continuing. Unfortunately, a lot of the local newspapers are struggling, and we rely on newspapers around the country. We have 25 printing plants around the country that we rely on to print the national edition of the paper and distribute it. If you factor in all the people at the press rooms and the delivery and the 60 people at the Times, there are some 30,000 people involved in producing and delivering the newspaper. Of course, most of those people are on the delivery side and in the press rooms, but it's a kind of an amazing thing to think about that many people are involved in producing and delivering the New York Times each day.
Yeah, and I saw that the CEO announced that you have a new target of 15 million subscribers to Times products by in a couple of years. In fact, by 2027, so in 5 years. And let's also talk about the fact that print newspapers we've been told, are dying, as we've seen in so many places, and including there were predictions of the Times stopping the print edition by 2025. That was a famous prediction about a decade ago, and it seems so vibrant and so so successful at the moment. When people talk to you about that, what do you say? And we have a guest, by the way, behind you.
That's right. That's Bowie. Bowie has decided to hop onto the couch behind me. Well, we've proved him wrong, and we're rather proud of that. It's a tribute to the people that work every day on the newspaper at the Times, and I mean, I'm just talking about the Times right now, but this is true of everyone at the Times. It's but what I'm really proud of with our group is the devotion every day to making a great newspaper. I think it's easy to take that for granted if you're me, for instance, but it's also easy to take it for granted if you get that blue bag or pick it up at the newsstand. You're looking at words and photos on a piece of paper, right? But the amount of care and dedication every day just blows me away. That that nobody ever says, we've done that before, or mails it in. It's really the commitment that our team has is truly inspiring to me.
Well, thank you also for mentioning all those people who helped deliver the paper. I remember during the pandemic, the worst of it, 5 a.m., the paper would thud on my Manhattan hallway because it was being delivered. And so those folks, through the worst of it, were delivering the newspapers. And it's a really special thing that happens so many times across the the country every day. So we have several questions that have come in, but we also want to get to the paper. So we'll weave in some of the questions. This is, wow, Neil found this tweet. It says, whoa, the New York Times hit my doorstep at 4:35 on Christmas Day. This is it was 37 degrees outside, 3 degrees in Celsius. But the delivery folks are doing their jobs. Very grateful for those who work hard to improve our lives. Thank you for finding that, Neil. And it really captures how I feel about these folks.
If I can just inject, I mean, that also includes the folks at the printing plants, who we have a fantastic, and I know you've gone out to the California plant and met Mike Connors, but you just can't say enough about the work they do, the way they coordinate with us. Our print deadlines have shifted earlier for a variety of reasons, but they work every time. There's just this past couple of weeks, the NBA finals and the hockey playoffs are an example of them working to get as many papers printed with those results in it as they can. And that's much harder said than done. So those folks are just a key part of what we do, and we work together. That's another, fabulous sense of teamwork with them.
Yeah, if folks can go into my Facebook and search Mike Connors and the New York Times printing plant, production plant. We did a Facebook Live from there, kind of read along from there. That was so exciting. Can you talk about the importance of getting those scores in the paper? Why does it still matter when people can get the scores in so many other ways?
Well, it's not just, and in fact, we actually do less of that with sports in terms of everyday kind of reporting, because as you say, that information is so readily available in real time. But for major events, and this goes for elections, and there are debates, political debates that happen at night. Any kind of major event, unfortunately, there are also moments of violence that happen late, and so we want to get you the big news we want to get the big news to as many of our readers as we can, no matter how late it happens, if it's at all possible. There were a couple of moments during the pandemic that have been kind of the most satisfying, I think, in the sense of seeing everyone working together to get late breaking news into the paper. One sounds sort of odd, I suppose, that Ruth Bader Ginsburg dying, her death being announced right on print deadline on a Friday night, and so many people who weren't even working jumping into a hangout like this, and working together to get that to our readers, to all of our readers, in the best way possible, fact checking with each other, suggesting words for headlines and that sort of thing. And then the other one that was really remarkable in that way was the morning that Biden was announced as the winner in the presidential election. It happened at about 11:30 on a Saturday morning. Our first edition closes at 12 noon, and so 30 minutes before deadline, we suddenly were going to tear up most of the front section of the paper, about, I think it was 14 pages or 12 pages or something like that. And again, everybody jumped in. We called the printing plants that were producing the first edition. They backed up our press time by 45 minutes, and we managed to redo the entire front section of the paper in a little bit more than an hour, to get the news to everyone who received the Sunday paper. So we're in the news business, and big events, we want to get to our readers.
Wow, I would have thought the front page needed to be reset, but you redid 14 pages in an hour. That's amazing. We have some pictures and things we want to show you and have you tell us about some historic front pages and important front pages in recent weeks and months. But I want to get to today's paper a little bit. So I'm going to just turn on our New York Times camera and ask you to read along with me as we look at the stories. And this is your front page, so tell us what we're looking at. What are the stories? what are some of the decisions that went into this paper today?
Well, on a typical Sunday, we want to try to focus. That's obviously the Sunday paper has our greatest readership. And so we want to give you sort of our most, we call them enterprise stories, sort of in-depth stories about different topics. And so obviously the gun safety, gun control issue is very much at the forefront of a lot of conversation right now. And so this story by Mike McIntyre, Glenn Thrush, and Eric Lipton looks at how the gun makers have really changed the conversation in terms of sales and that sort of thing. There's a remarkable statistic in here that said, I'm not sure where it is exactly, but it points out that until recently, the focus of advertising for gun sales was about hunting, and only in the past few years have they changed the focus dramatically toward safety and personal protection. The number of guns owned in this country, I think, surpasses the population itself at this point. So, but this looks at this is really focused on the marketing by the gun makers, and one of the slogans that they cite is time to man up or something like that.
Be a man among men is the line here. And you're right about the number of guns has exceeded the population, and there were firearm sales of 8.5 million in the year 2000, and last year 38.9. So from 8.5 to 38.9 million in these 22 years. Stunning stats.
And another interesting thing is that despite the be a man among men, the biggest growth is among sales to women.
Yes.
So, interesting.
And then what do we have here? And what do you call this? So this is an enterprise story. So let's teach folks a little bit of some of your parlance as well.
Yes. Well, in fact, I think this front page is really all enterprise reporting. This story on Ukraine is a stepped back look at, one of the things that we've really, Michael Slackman, our foreign editor, has really tried to talk to folks about the reporting staff and push for, not just, it's very easy to get caught up in daily war coverage that almost becomes like sports coverage, right? The Russians pushed, X miles forward, or Ukraine pushed back the Russian forces. And obviously that is an important part of war coverage. But what Michael has really talked about a lot is taking people behind the scenes, talking about the human elements of this. One of the things I was just talking to him about this. I remember when the war first, when there was talk about the war first starting, and when there were people who said, "What's Ukraine? Who cares about Ukraine? What's that all about?" And now we've learned, Ukraine is one of the big producers of wheat in the world, and there are all sorts of connections that affect obviously our economy and the world economy, and so they've done a lot of great work in that regard. And this story is just talking about how there's no real clear number of the number of people who've died, who've been killed rather, and just the suffering that's associated with, just this amazing. I don't think it's hard. I mean, I think it's hard for us to sort of imagine what it must be like to live with, the possibility of missile strikes or troops, parading into town with, tanks and all kinds of weapons. And so this story just talks about how horrible that is, and the fact that there's no the number of dead probably is much greater than what we could possibly know.
Thank you for that background. And here, a story about a New York House race. So we have national, international news, and then something much more specific here.
Right. Although it also kind of gets at the kind of unusual, sort of politics that we're now in this world. It's a story about a New York House race, but one that would have been as interesting if it was in Chicago or Houston or LA. I think with 15 candidates running for a single House seat, it's a little bit like the last presidential election with the Democrats running against Trump. So,
including a Chinese American activist involved in the Tiananmen Square protests. That's unusual. Yeah. And then this very important story by Apurva Mandavili, who writes about vaccines arrive for the youngest. There's been so much debate and talk about that. Now parents are put on the spot.
Yeah, it's the vaccines for children younger than 5, and the sort of discussion about, okay, we've gone this far with the pandemic, and some people are eager, as the woman in the photo is eager for her younger child to get vaccinated, but a lot of others are wrestling with the question of, do they take a chance with a vaccine that isn't totally tested out, and it's tested out, but we don't know what the after effects are for children. And at the same time, we've gone through 2.5 years of the pandemic, and the children have built up some sort of immunity, apparently. So it's talking about that kind of decision that parents of those children are facing, and a lot of them are not willing to, right now are saying they're going to go very slowly.
And Apurva has done a fantastic job all through the pandemic covering various aspects. She's fantastic. I just wanted to point out that when you started at the Times, color was not on the front page, right? And certainly there were no ads. And people said that ads being on the front page of the New York Times would be the end of the Times, but you've all survived that.
That's right. And just to be clear, their color existed when I started. I'm not that old, but we just didn't have it on the front page.
Yeah, no, I do that.
I know. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Yes, I know. I mean, the black and white. What was that movie? The black and white movie. Anyway, go
ahead. Let's talk a little bit about how you think about these 2 pages. These have evolved over time as well.
Yeah, there are pages that we actually created after we created the Print Hub. They were, we just felt like there was a better use, without getting into too much about what they were, what was on them. We felt like there was a way to create what we loosely started calling a dashboard to the New York Times. We realized that if you just got the paper, you didn't know about all the other events that were going on around the Times, for one thing. We also were already publishing online that's a list of videos, conferences, events that the Times puts on, stuff that's online that we are, particularly wanted to promote to readers who, if you get the paper, you have access to the online report too. So we wanted to find a way to address those things to our print readers. And the Inside the Times piece, which is the main anchor to the 2 pages, we were already writing these pieces, and they were mostly online, and they were very popular. And we've continued to do that on a daily basis, and really have turned them into as much as possible a sort of behind the scenes look at a story. We've been working with the Times. Recently created a group called the Trust Team, which was the focus is to try to educate readers as much as possible, I guess, to simplify it, about what we do, and teach them how we go about reporting, what a dateline means. It means we're actually there. We try to tell, especially online, we try to give people background on the reporting expertise, etc. And then the rest of the pages are kind of little bits and pieces of information. You're looking at the quote of the day there. There's always a quote from a story. If you're, you're got a page number to the story that, wherever the headline or whatever. and Here to Help, which is a little bit of advice taken from a newsletter or some other digital article that we've got. And then at the top of the page, one of my favorite things is some facts, some interesting facts taken from stories throughout the paper, and they're the sort of what we kind of call water cooler things, where you don't have to read the story, but hopefully you'll be able to tell your colleague, hey, did you know, some, I don't know, I don't should find one. We could find an interesting fact there. And
sure, yeah. Look at this. Since 1929, the U.S. stock market has been in a bear market nearly 24% of the time. So you think about the stock market always going up, but quarter of the time it's been a bear market. And Ellen points out that the Tiffany ad that was there for 100 years, from 1917 to into the 21st century, is no longer there.
Right. They've taken a new approach too, and they created a little bit of a challenge for our friends at College Point in particular, where you showed the strip ad on the front page. Well, Tiffany has created a regular appearance where they have a strip ad that then wraps around to a full page ad on the back, which is a complicated process for the folks at College Point to produce.
Okay, let's go into the paper a little bit. We want to see all the sections today because we're with the print editor of the New York Times, Tom Jolly. Please follow him on Twitter, folks. He's at Tom Jolly. And thank you all for joining us. And please tag a friend and please share. We'd love to have them watch us live or later. Deep international coverage, of course, continues. A lot of use of photographs. Declaring Curry enemy number one to get India's police in shape. This is reminiscent of discussions about donuts and policemen in the U.S., but I've not read the story and I can't wait to see it, to read it. Here's more of the war in Ukraine. And can you talk about when you decided with the coronavirus to start, sprinkling the stories throughout rather than having that coronavirus special section every day? How did that work?
Yeah, well, we first, I'll say that, back in when the pandemic first started, we realized that almost every section of the paper was being dominated by coverage of it. So we created a front of the book of the A section thing called Tracking a Virus, I think it was called. And so we put all of our stories there. Because it was so, everything related to, we all wanted to know what was going on. And then, like most of us, we thought that it was starting to come to an end I guess in April 2021, it started to feel like it was finally under control. And so we decided, as of Memorial Day weekend 2021, to pull back and put the coverage into their regular homes, as in international and national. Lo and behold, it came back in different guises, I guess. And as we know, we're still wrestling with it, but obviously the coverage is not as overwhelming, I guess. And so it's a little bit more manageable. But we did have moments where we thought, did we act too quickly in pulling back on that?
Thank you. Talk about corrections and the role they play in the Times.
Well, we want to be, we want to be accurate. We want to be, we want people to, trust our work. And when we make a mistake, we want to correct it. And so we do. And as you see if you read them on a regular basis, many of them are fairly incremental, but important in terms of if misspelling someone's name is definitely a bad thing. That's their identity. If you don't give them their identity, that's not helpful. But as you can see, there are a number of corrections from last Sunday's paper. We do try to put corrections about the Sunday paper in the following Sunday's paper, since there are a fairly large number of people who only get the Sunday paper each week.
That's so interesting. I didn't know that. So folks, we're all learning a lot about how the Times is put together. Please post your questions and comments and we'll read them to Tom. We're just going in here. Here is the national coverage. And then we see a lot of ads promoting newspapers and the Times itself. And sometimes we see ads promoting newspapers in general. And here is Questlove, who's only described here in the headline as Amir, but he's Amir Questlove Thompson. And you had mentioned him before. And he's also on the back page here for the New York Times. It's a very striking ad.
Right. He's the focal point of the newest ad campaign.
And he also does the Wordle. Can I admit to you that I've not done a Wordle at all, ever?
Oh, well, be careful. Once you start, you can't quit. I was late to it, but I'm now an addict.
And here is more coverage. Some of this is U.S. coverage, New York coverage. And then we'll just want to do a shout out for Juneteenth. 18 states have added it as a paid holiday. President Biden declared it a federal holiday for all Americans to commemorate the end of slavery, but only 18 have passed it. This is about funding and who gets paid for it, and that's why it's important. It's an important story. And talk a little bit about the obits, please, as we look at the obits of Joel Whitburn and Dorothy Smith.
Well, it's an area that we take a lot of pride in and put a lot of effort in. I think we like to think that our obituary presentation is the best around, and we've taken a lot of, if you look historically, in fact, on Monday, as we do a special obituary presentation called Overlooked, because historically the Times has not been good about recognizing just a lot of people. It tended to be obituaries, unfortunately, of white men, and so there were a lot of women, a lot of people of color who were overlooked. And this presentation in the Monday paper is our effort to catch up on some of that. And it's pretty remarkable sometimes when you see people who did not get an obituary in the New York Times.
By the way, Nikhil says, I was never one to play games much, but now Wordle is the first thing I do every day.
Me too.
That's amazing. To get people to change their their habits is not easy. So I know you're a big sports fan. Talk about the sports coverage, please.
So the sports coverage has obviously changed over time, and as we were talking about earlier, we don't look at print as a vehicle for delivering scores or game stories as much as we once did. Like the rest of the paper, we look for opportunities to not only present just kind of news about the athletes and teams, but also enterprise reporting, in-depth reporting on different subjects. The example I like to use is we once covered every city council meeting. We don't do that. We write about the big subjects. We once had shipping charts on the front of the paper. And that's another example of something that's from years ago that went away. And just the paper evolves and reflects the way the world gets its information, and we try to remain as vital as possible with what we do in print.
And Ken Fisher is watching fresh from Iowa, 80 minutes west of the Mississippi. And by the way, this is where Neil would like to be, I'm sure, New York Yankees Nasty Nestor night on June 24th. First 18,000 people, Neil, who get through the door. And here's all the coverage. So there is a lot going on in the paper today. In the sports section, US Open is going on as well. And lots to see. All right, before we get to the rest of the paper, we have some slides we've put together, so we'd like to discuss them with you.
Sure.
So let's look through the paper, and here's a photograph of us at in your home as we ate bagels brought by our friend Carla Varanakis, and Neil and I got to come to your home and read the paper. There's your daughter Sawyer.
Hmm.
That was a lot of fun.
That was fun.
Yeah, and tell us about something important that happened this month at the Times.
This week, in fact, that's right. Dean Baquet stepped down as executive editor. We had quite a going away day on Tuesday for him, and Joe Kahn stepped into the role. It's Joe is the 7th executive editor I've worked for, and I've been at the Times. Actually, you started subscribing not long after I got there. I've been there 29 years, so you've been a subscriber for 28 years. At any rate, quite a well orchestrated and thought out transition, not only by Dean and Joe, but by A.G. Sulzberger, our publisher, in terms of kind of making it as seamless as I think as you can imagine. As you know, we've had a few abrupt changes in executive editorship at the Times, and in this case, it's really was handled so amazingly well that I don't, there obviously will be things that Joe will do that will be different from Dean, and Joe is obviously a different person than Dean, but I don't think that there will be anything dramatic that readers will notice, at any moment along the way.
And yeah, this is part of the coverage here. And Dan Barry, who's been on our show before, says the great Dean Baquet waves to a standing ovation on his last day.
Yeah, I mean, just to quickly recap, if you think back to when Dean took over, the paper was challenged in terms of that we were still recovering from the financial crisis. We were behind on the digital side. The innovation report had come out, and we were also trying to figure out how to move forward with keeping print vital, but not the main focus for everyone in the newsroom. And since that, during Dean's tenure, we've added something like 700 people to the newsroom. The Daily was created as an amazingly successful podcast. Any number of other podcasts have been added. We've added a video team that also includes an amazing video investigations team that was very instrumental in a Pulitzer that we won concerning drone warfare by the United States, and has also done some remarkable stuff around the January 6th insurrection. Dean, the accolades for Dean include, as well as winning 18 Pulitzer Prizes in his 8 years. So the accolades were, well deserved for Dean. But it also is important to say that Joe was a big part of that, and Joe was instrumental in creating and building out the live report on the digital side, where you're getting up to the minute reports on developing stories, things like the January 6th hearings that are going on right now, the Uvalde shooting, any major event, we quickly jump into a live reporting mode on the digital report. So both of them have been incredibly important in the Times' success.
And this was an inside paper. This is not the actual cover of the Times.
That's right. That was a fun little project that our friend Wayne Camadoy was instrumental in designing an 8-page special section that we handed out to folks on Tuesday to commemorate Dean's tenure. And a lot
And
of
that's a hilarious headline, right? It says the greatest journalist in a generation to exit in the most modest fashion of his generation.
right, right, yeah. It's an inside. Dean was famous for saying, "This is the greatest story in a generation," or this might be the most important story in a generation. So, we're obviously having some fun teasing him a little bit with his phrases and his also for his well-known fashion style. It was nice to, given all the other news, it was very nice to have a little fun to put together a special in-house newspaper.
Sure. So let's look at some of the front pages, important front pages that we've been talking about with the news. So here is the Uvalde shooting.
Yeah, I mean, this is just a horrible story, and obviously the suffering for the families is terrible. But when you're in the newsroom and you're reading, you're involved in covering this stuff. There's a really, it's difficult. There's a lot of emotions. I remember the picture at the top of first of all, I remember the day that the news was very vague initially in terms of what had happened. There were reports of a shooting, and it took a long time to really realize how many kids had been killed. And I remember that picture when we first saw it in the late afternoon, and you saw that little boy in the blue shirt, and you kind of went, "Oh my God, these kids, they're so young."
Yeah.
And we wanted to, we felt like we really wanted to drive that home. And as happens with a lot of these situations, it took a while to get the identities and photos of the victims. But, we felt like it was really, really important to make, I guess I would say honor them in the sense of just to show people what had happened in the best way we could. So the page on the right was the following day, and we spent a lot of time, like I was saying earlier. Everybody, one of the things that I'm really proud of and admire about our folks is, they want to do something that really tells the story in the best way possible. And so there was a lot of conversation around it. Tom Bodkin, who designs the front page most days at the Times' chief creative officer, came up with this idea and of putting the photographs across the top of the page. Obviously, we normally would have a headline at the top of the page, but just an enormous number of people on the digital and print side worked very hard to, confirm the photos, confirm the identities, and, tell this story in the most touching, I guess, just we really wanted to bring it across to people what had happened.
So difficult to discuss, especially on Father's Day. Folks, we're with Tom Jolly, the print editor of the New York Times, and we're talking about the Times and its coverage, and we have some more covers to discuss. Please share with your friends and family. Just tag them. They can watch live or later. This entire show will run as soon as we're off the air, and we do this every Sunday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And Ellen says every time there's a massacre, at least weekly now, it is jarring. We're no England, who banned guns after 2, and we know what's happened in Australia and New Zealand. So let's look at another cover. And Marilyn says, I'm uneducated but fearful of going into the classroom. Marilyn is a dear friend who lives in Staten Island. And talk about this unusual front page.
Yeah, that's another. And by the way, I should, I just want to mention Andrew Sondern and some other folks who were involved in that other page. It's a Josh Kretschmer, there Maura Foley. There were again, people really come together to tell a story like this. And to go back to the million deaths, that was another story that we felt was really important to kind of codify, I guess I'll say, when it happened. Obviously, the daily sort of drama about the pandemic had waned from at least from a year earlier. You might remember we did the 100,000 deaths page, where we had a front page that was entirely text and listed just a line basically from an obituary of people who had died from COVID. In this case, we finally reached the 1 million death mark. And I shouldn't say we finally, but we unfortunately reached it. And our data team had been tracking and created a system of tracking this stuff that actually became kind of the national site for a lot of people that were tracking the death toll. And we also wanted, we didn't want to lose sight of the fact that 1 million deaths was 1 million individual people. What's the saying is something like, one death is a tragedy, 1 million is a statistic. And so we spent a lot of time, our reporting teams and graphics teams and designers spent a lot of time talking about this. And Carrie Mifsud, one of our designers, worked very hard on creating this for print. It's a wraparound, a map of the United States, obviously, with no borders, or barely any borders. The main identity of the country is the deaths, little pinpoints of each death that obviously are darker in areas where there were more deaths. Online, you could click on some of those and up would pop an individual. And in this case, and by the way, to do a wraparound of the Sunday paper, we needed to talk to advertising to say, we're going to take the back page. You can't, can we, we don't want to sell an ad there. And they were in agreement that for this moment that it was important to do that. And then inside, Carrie designed, I think it was 6 to 8 pages, where we looked at individuals who had, the individual stories. And then one of the most compelling parts of it was a page that took a line from, we had reader feedback, people telling us how they felt about losing a loved one, and compiled that all into a big block of type that was very very emotional to look at, to see how everyone was.
Nikhil says the situation was so horrific, just knowing that it was all I could handle. I couldn't bring myself to read about each child. He's talking about the Uvalde shooting, or even look at the photos, though I think it was important to humanize the tragedy as the Times did. But this could also apply to what you've done with the paper as well, with the Corona story. And Natasha's look at Florida, and we don't even have reliable data. So sad for all the families affected. One of the things that's going to propel DeSantis to the top of the contenders for the 2024 election is that Florida did so great during the pandemic, and you can see here. Lippy says, Dr. Lippy Roy, who has been a guest multiple times on the show, says, great coverage of COVID-19 by the NYT and gun safety. My YouTube show last Wednesday was dedicated to gun violence as a public health crisis, so do check out her channel. And just for those who may have just joined us, this doesn't look like a regular New York Times front page for many reasons, but what you're really seeing is the wraparound part. So that the eastern half of the United States was the regular paper, and then wrapped around was the other part, and that's what they did. The creativity is so important as a way to tell this tragedy and to bring that alive. We have one more story that we want to have you discuss with us.
Real quick, I just real quickly want to say this. One of the things about design, I think, is that this looks very simple in a lot of ways, right? But there was an enormous amount of work that went into it. So it's just a great example of the design work that, in this case, Carrie Mifsud did. But we have such fantastic designers. And the headline, there was a tremendous amount of work put into the headline. I believe it was David Vesey or Sean Ernst who was working on that. And again, it seems simple, but you want to just say it in the best way possible.
And of course, this was a way of measuring it, right? Having each dot was in fact a way of measuring it, but it was still immeasurable. Let's talk about another story that got a lot of attention, an entire special section about a historical event that some people knew, but most people did not, about how one of the reasons why Haiti is in such poor financial state is that the slaves who rebelled and overthrew their masters, there was reparations involved, but not to the slaves, but to the masters. And Haiti sent billions of dollars to France since the revolution, and are paying a price every day today. So frame that for us and tell us about how you were able to play it in print.
Yeah, this was an enormous project that our team of reporters had worked on for months, and ended up as I believe 4 parts, maybe 5 parts, including an interactive graphic. And this was the lead up to it. As you say, it's an amazing story about how the slaves in Haiti overthrew their masters and then ended up having to pay reparations that have basically kept Haiti in an impoverished state, combined with the fact that their leadership, their political leadership, has been so corrupt in recent history. But it goes back and looks at the history of the reparations and how, in particular, a French bank was involved in that. This was such an enormous story that we talked with the foreign desk about making it into a special section, because and when I say enormous, I mean both in terms of importance, but also in length. So we said we really think this could be presented to readers best as a special section, so that you don't feel like, first of all, so it doesn't eat up the entire front section of the paper, but also so you can hang on to that section and look at it, share it with people, and so Andrea Zagato was spent a long time working with the foreign desk to design this section, and again, online this was presented as kind of an interactive where you scrolled up and the photos of Haiti flowed through and different parts of the different headlines would flow through, and this had to be deconstructed for print and reorganized, and Andrea put a tremendous amount of effort and thought into creating this fantastic section. And again, then there were 3 more parts for print that came out. This was Sunday, and then Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, the other elements of the story were in print. We've lost your audio there.
Sorry, one of the things we saw in there was pictures of the Eiffel Tower being constructed. And the reason for that is that that bank used money that came from Haiti to build the Eiffel Tower. And so if you think about the injustice of this all, is just really stunning. Folks, it's 9:35. We're about 25 minutes left with Tom Jolly. We are discussing the New York Times. We're discussing journalism. We're discussing the future of print. And Therese says, I belong to a French table, and a member who was a reporter in Paris could only find one story about this history New York Times section in any Paris newspaper. So we wish that was covered even more in France. But of course, the New York Times International Edition has a big footprint in Europe. And Natasha says the Haiti story was very powerful. It was shared widely in Florida, where the largest Haitian American community lives.
And I was just going to say, as well as our digital report, obviously, and we translated this for
Yes.
both Haitians and French readers. So.
Yes, I saw that. It's not often. I mean, I've been used to seeing the Spanish and seeing Chinese, like Mandarin occasionally, but seeing the French and the Creole was very interesting and appropriate for what you're trying to do. Folks, we have about 25 minutes left with Tom, and we have a lot of the paper to still go through, and we want to hear his take on how this all comes together. So we're going to start by looking at this particular arts and leisure cover, which is Everyday Keepsakes Made Precious for Juneteenth. 10 Black artists and photographers consider an heirloom of particular significance in their families. And this was the piece that Tom mentioned from the Inside the Times earlier today.
That's right. And it's a great example of the kind of projects that we are doing more and more nowadays. And it's obviously presented online as well. But I think the other thing about this is it's an example of how print remains vital in these kinds of presentations. You could say the same thing for Haiti. In fact, online it's great to look at the presentation and review it, but you can't hang on to it. And here you can hang on to it. You can look at the photos on a larger scale. Renee Vasquez and Jennifer Ledbury designed this for the arts and leisure section, print section. We talked about the possibility of doing this as a special section, but we kind of, the other part of it was we felt like we want our regular sections to be special too. And so we thought that it really worked well as a big presentation in arts and leisure. And the photographs are really quite remarkable.
They really, really are. Paula says, happy Juneteenth. It's a perfect weekend to support a Black business and or to give a mutual aid fund or a Black organization. Thank you, Paula, for that reminder. And here's the rest of this. It's really beautiful images, and you have a motif up here to kind of signal that this is a special section, right? Or a special part of this. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, special presentation. Okay, let's keep going. Talk a little bit about your relationship with the magazine.
Well, I don't want to say we don't have any relationship with the magazine, but they do their own thing, and this story is another remarkable story, actually. And one of the interesting things about the magazine is that I guess I'll say the relationship with the magazine in terms of the rest of the newsroom is that while they do their own thing, they also work with the digital report to figure out when to present their anchor stories each week on the digital side. And a notable thing about the cover story which is on transgender care for teenagers, essentially, young people, mostly teenagers. There was the morning briefing newsletter on Tuesday or Wednesday was devoted to the background on this, written by Emily Bazelon, who's the author of the story. The daily podcast was devoted to it, and then of course the Sunday magazine has the main story about it. So it's an example of how we can tell our story in so many different ways and reach readers in so many different through so many different vehicles now.
And this is the interview, which normally is a couple of pages. They've really blown it out because it's Tom Hanks. And this was before Tom was in the news over the last couple of days, where he talked back. He really pushed away some overzealous fan who was approaching his wife Rita and told him to F off. It was very interesting to see Tom in that mode, but really humanized him. But here's a really long interview, much longer than normal. And it was condensed from 2 conversations, is what it said.
Right.
And this is
for the new Elvis movie.
And this is the gender therapy story that you were saying again. So, I mean, throughout the paper, the use of photography has changed over your 29 years, and and there's so much to read here. Bosnia on the brink. Goodness, I didn't know that that Bosnia was in trouble. Here's caught up in a 21st century of ethno-nationalism and fake history. The country Serbs are now endangering its fragile peace. Good Lord, that's all we need now is going back to Bosnia as a powder keg of problems. So, and this is long-held ideas of about Native American art should look like, what it should look like, is being upended. So much to read. Do you get to do the crossword puzzle? And look at this, a little bit of color here.
Yeah, I do the mini. I don't know if I have the skill, but I also don't have the time for the big one.
Yeah, and I've never seen this traffic light idea here. So they're doing something.
That's kind of neat. Yeah.
They're doing something.
Natasha's question on the screen, and the magazine stock is different, and in fact, so is and the magazine is actually printed at a different location, not at our printing plant. And we also use a different stock for Sunday Styles. It's a little heavier stock. Primarily because of the advertising that we often get for Sunday Styles.
And a splash of angst. Shopping for swimwear can unleash complex emotions as well as economic and ethical questions. Why is it so hard, and why are bathing suits so expensive? Not your average. Sorry.
I was just going to say that's a very interesting story that looks at how come I believe it says the average bathing suit for a woman right now is about $250, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's so crazy. What a price that women have to pay for this. Here's a Ralph Lauren ad for Father's Day, and here's Modern Love. We had your colleague Dan Jones on the show when we were doing the Modern Love column, and we talked about, he's the editor, and we had so much fun with him.
Yeah, he's great.
All right, I'm going to put you on the spot, Tom, with the social cues column with Phil Gallanz. As you know, there's no right or wrong answer, but let's see what you say to one of the questions that came in there's an etiquette question. People often ask me for recommendations, restaurants, service providers, etc. Then after I ask them how much does it cost, I tell them, and then after I make them, they ask how much does it cost. I tell them, and they frequently exclaim, I could never pay that much. This leaves me at a loss. I didn't volunteer the information, they asked for it. Then they make me feel bad that my recommendation doesn't fit their budget. Any advice from you, Tom?
I would say, well, you asked, or tell me what your budget is then, and maybe I can offer other advice.
Right. So maybe that's exactly, I think, what he says. Do you have a budget in mind? Before making a recommendation, short circuit the conversation by asking, do you have a budget in mind? So great minds thinking alike there with you and Philip, who does such a great job with this column.
I thought you were going to ask me about the lead item, because my daughter plays hockey on an otherwise all boys team. And this this woman has a son who is on a team, but the star of the team is a girl. And the interesting question was, should she be encouraging the girl to move up to a higher division so her son can play?
Oh, so interesting.
Right.
I want to read the answer to that. And here's that bathing suit story. Wow, look at this. And this is 3 pages about the bathing suit. 4 pages on the bathing suit.
Yeah, it's a deep look.
And here's another way America is changing. Here's, we have Emily Mayer marrying Waleed Shahid on the as a lead story in the New York Times wedding section. Over the years, these have changed. Obviously, we've seen same-sex marriage, weddings, and so much more. So it's great. And here's an ad here. Let's go to the Sunday Review.
Sure.
It's a little more wrinkled than, I feel like I need to iron this, but the feminist malaise, where's the women's movement when we need it most? Michelle Goldberg's piece. Oh, I didn't realize that there's a loudspeaker or a megaphone here, as you see here. So talk to me about the Sunday paper, the Sunday Review, please.
Sunday Review is put together by the opinion section. So we on the Print Hub don't have anything to do with the content there. Much like the magazine, they're entirely put together by a different group. And of course, the opinion desk is separate from the news desk. We don't, we don't share thoughts on coverage or anything like that. And obviously, as the name suggests, they're often or their main mission is to express different opinions about different subjects.
By the way, our friend Mike Connors, who we did our New York Times read along with at the production plant in Queens, says, "Go Sawyer." And good morning, Sri Tom. Happy Father's Day. Print lives in College Point.
That's right.
And Mike, we're going to hit you up for a return visit. It's been 3 years, so it's time. And here the story about Ginny Thomas and Mike Pence and so much going on in the world. And First Person, this is I guess a new podcast.
That's right. Yeah. There was an interesting question that flashed up, and I lost track, but it was basically asking how we decide the importance of a story, or
Yeah, here's Sujana Chandrasekhar. Is there consensus as to what stories are more or less important, or is it your own judgment?
So the process, just to quickly run through our day, we have a 9 a.m. news meeting, and the representatives of each of the different news reporting teams is there to talk about the big news of the day. That's one thing that has slightly changed with Joe's rise to the editorship. He's now focusing the meeting. He's sort of leading the meeting and asking desks to talk about the main news of the day. So that this past week, the January 6th hearings was one subject. Ukraine, of course, is a subject every day. And so the different desks talk about what their stories are related to that. And oftentimes a story, for instance, on, I think it was Friday when the vaccines were approved for the children under 5, or someday this week, that was another discussion. So there's a discussion at that meeting, and then at the end of that meeting, there's sort of a talk about how the different stories will be played on the digital report, and a consensus of what is the most important story. And then in mid-afternoon, the print team meets, and we decide on, again, a consensus with the executive editor and usually a couple of their masthead editor on what the 6 stories for the front page are. And then we being the print hub, ask each department what their most important stories are. So we may have room, obviously, for print. We have a finite amount of space. So there may only be room for, let's say, 10 stories from the foreign desk. And so we'll talk to them and say, okay, we've only got room for 10 stories. Obviously, these 8 are important, but of the remaining 4 or 5, what needs to get into print today, and what could hold, or what doesn't need to run in print at all. I always say I want to ask the desk to give us that advice, because we don't, I don't want to be the one deciding if a story out of, let's say, Japan is more important than a story out of Israel. We want the experts, the foreign desk editors, to tell us that. So that's how we operate. We get, we plan out. We have a pretty good idea, just based on that news meeting from the morning, about what the most important stories are. But then we work with the individual departments to get their guidance on the remaining stories.
Excellent. Here is Therese Steiner's comment. I taught our black lab Blackie one trick: running down our steep driveway to fetch the blue bag wrapped in the New York Times.
You see Bo sleeping behind me. I wish I could teach him that, but I'm happy that he's just not barking right now. That's my
We'll take that. My Tara is also gently lying here and very, very relaxed. Here's the Sunday business story here, front page. And also a lot of design now goes into the Sunday business compared to before. Brace yourself for the drop. And then here's an unusual story: why a Rhodes Scholar took a job at Starbucks. The ambition and idealism of a young barista speaks to a broader change on unions. I want to read that. And I'm a little confused because I know that Square changed its name to Block. This is the Jack Dorsey's other business, but I guess the company is still, or the product is still called Square, but the company is called Block now. And look at this, illustrations, drawings, other ways of telling stories.
Yeah, Ellen Pollock, who's our business editor, has really put a big. She's been the business editor for a number of years now, maybe lost track, 5 or 6 years, I guess. But she's put a lot of focus on making the Sunday business section, a big thought section with some standing features, but trying to come up with a big cover story each Sunday. And Molly Bedford, one of our designers who focuses on business, has done a great job, along with some other colleagues, in raising the level of design. The business section was always a challenge for how do you illustrate stories that are mostly about businesses that are in buildings and people standing around, right? So they've done a great job of coming up with innovative ways of illustrating stories.
So let's ask about the New York Times and the return to work.
We are. I don't want to say in a holding pattern. We are in the. We've had many fits and starts. The plan is for us to once we move forward with it, is for us to be in the office 3 days a week and work remotely 2 days a week. Or another way they're saying it is more than 50% of the time in the office. So, but flexibility is a big part of it, and obviously we've known that we can operate at a very high level working from home, and kind of an amazing thing to be putting out the newspaper. We've got a designer in Ireland, and we've had people in Texas and Hawaii and never been.
That's amazing. Here is the real estate cover. A costly reputation. Pit bulls and other dogs considered dangerous can be difficult to insure. And then talk, if you can, a little bit about the metropolitan section, because it's not like most of the other sections, right?
Yeah, and in fact, just for the benefit of your readers outside of the New York area, the real estate and metropolitan sections are only produced for New York area readers.
Okay.
Both sections have some coverage in the paper that goes out nationally. It's usually about 2 pages of coverage. The metropolitan section is a weekly section that is put together for generally has feature sections. Pretty fascinating lead story today about Kid Creole and sort of tragic sort of situation that happened to him and that he caused when he killed someone who was sounds like slightly unhinged, but here is a hip hop pioneer who basically was living in a boarding house because all of his money had dried up and his career had kind of dried up. He was trying to revive his career, and this happened, this confrontation where he ended up killing someone. He says he was scared of, he felt like he was being threatened. At any rate, interesting, in-depth story of a pioneer.
I just noticed the victims, the person who was murdered, his name. I mean, John Jolly is the person's name.
Yeah, no relation.
Yes. Here is in the diary, Sunday routine, all of those sections there. And then finally, the book review.
Book review is, of course, one of the more popular Sunday sections for a lot of our readers. Does a fantastic job of giving folks reviews of some of the best books. It's one of the one of the difficult things about the book review is that they're you can imagine how many books are written, and they can only review so many, and they have certain standards and kind of judgments in terms of subjects that they want to focus on. Sometimes they'll have they'll do a summer reading section or best books of the year kind of section. And it's one of the difficult things when people who I know wrote a book and ask me if I can get it reviewed by the book review section, and I have to tell them that I have absolutely no power in doing that, but happy to give them the contact information. And as far as I know, no one that has done that has had their book reviewed. So, but the reviews are fantastic, and they do a great job.
I was struck by this unusual set of reviews or blurbs for this one book.
Mhm.
Best Holocaust book of 2021 and Best Narrative Business book of 2021. The same book,
Right.
Unstoppable, Siggy B. Wilzig's Astonishing Journey from Auschwitz Survivor and Penniless Immigrant to Wall Street Legend by Joshua Green. Unusual, for sure.
Right.
So we are almost done here. We have just a few minutes with our friend Tom Jolly. We have lots of comments and questions that have come in, and we want to say that Mike Connor said that great. We'll wait to see you one of these days and nights at the printing plant, which is great. And Marilyn says, I have not been here for a while. I forgot how much I love this show, which is so cool. We want to give you a minute to catch your breath there, Tom, because we want you to come back and tell us about our guest for next week, Amber Williams, who is the editor of the children's section of the Times, and she's going to be our guest next week. So we, you know her so well, we want you to tell all of us about her, and we'll come right back to you. I'm going to ask Neil to come on, and we'll do some housekeeping, and then bring you back. Thanks, Tom and Neil. What a great show!
Absolutely.
Perfect for Father's Day.
Absolutely. So many great topics that we covered. The front pages for Uvalde and for COVID, the Haiti special section. One of the things, and then we covered so much of the paper and got Tom's insights into not just the production of the paper, but the individual sections. Reminded Sri of one of your professors at Columbia had a quote, and I believe this was it was Sig Gisler, about when you're writing a story, you can have all the great examples in the world, all the greatest anecdotes to put in, but you can't fit everything, and so you have to drown kittens.
Drown your kittens, not just
drown
any
your
kittens,
kittens.
drown your own kittens. Yeah.
Right?
Kill your darlings is another way that's said.
Exactly.
And we got so much in and learned so much. Here's Sujana saying that I love this behind the scenes exposition, like going backstage after seeing a Broadway show. Thank you, and thank you, Sujana, for being such a devoted viewer and friend.
One of the kittens we partially drowned were the modern day record of front pages with banner headlines after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. 37 straight days of banner headlines, which was incredible. And Tom was
going across. Yeah, we'll ask him that
top.
when he comes back too. Yeah, look at that, going across the top.
Like I couldn't drown this kitten, Shri. I couldn't let go of this one. This was too special.
No, but also just think about everything that's happened in the last, in the modern years of the Times, and they've not done 37 days in a row with that, even with 9/11, the elections, things like that. So that tells you the importance of Ukraine.
Pretty incredible. Want to definitely give a shout out, of course, to Paula Kiger, who has been engaging with the audience on Facebook and LinkedIn, sharing links to articles, keeping the show lively. So thank you, Paula, for that. We also want to thank our sponsor, Muckrack. If you're interested in being a sponsor, please reach out to Sri at digimentors.group or myself, Neil at digimentors.group. Of course, this is a production of Digimentors, our consulting firm that you set up, Sri. You're the co-founder of. I'm proud to be our VP of Events and Comms. We do social and digital consulting, hybrid and virtual events, recruiting, and a lot more. So if you're interested in having us work on a project for you, work on an event, please let us know. You can email us at sri@digimentors.group. or Neil at digimentors.group. And we would love to work with you on a project. And finally, we also want to give a shout out to the Local Connection newsletter. The Center for Cooperative Media at Montclair State University brings you the Local Connection newsletter. Each week, it offers story ideas and pro tips for journalists. And best of all, it's free. You can subscribe at bit.ly/local news tips. bit.ly/local news tips. So with that, what we do, we'll bring Tom back on and have him introduce next week's guest. Tom, with that lead up, tell us a little bit about Amber Williams.
So we hired Amber. I hired Amber in, I think it was 2017, to be the first editor of the A2, A3 presentation. She was an editor at Scientific American magazine and doing the front of the book section for that magazine. So a little bit of a different sort of background for someone coming to do the A2, A3 presentation. But she was fantastic. She got the pages going. And like I said, launched them and became the perfect candidate for the Times was interested in producing a kids section. We felt like that was an audience that a lot of our readers talked to us and wanted to have some sort of print vehicle for their kids. And so Amber became the first editor of the kids section too, and she is the editor now. And it's a monthly section that comes out with the last Sunday of every month. In the paper, and just such a fun section. It says on the front, this is not, adults aren't supposed to read this, but it's too inviting to not look at. And she's the thing to me that always is so fantastic is the artwork is always so much fun, especially the cover, but oftentimes inside as well. Little background. Sawyer, my daughter Sawyer, actually did an ad for a promotional ad that appears every once in a while on the back page. Amber had reached out to some kids to do little drawings for ads. So every once in a while we see Sawyer's ad appear on the back page. But Amber does a fantastic job of. It would not be easy, right, to write to the kids' level if you're an adult, but she does a fantastic job of finding ways to do that.
That's right. We had some great comments that came in, and Natasha actually reminded us not to forget about Ukraine, that it might be not be in the news as often, but it's still very sad. And certainly, that string, we want to clarify, it's a modern day record from what we know. There may have been a string of headlines during World War II, but in recent memory, we haven't seen anything like this in the Times. In terms of these front pages.
No, that's right. And believe me, we are not forgetting about Ukraine as we saw earlier. There's a top of the page story. We have more than 24 people reporting from Ukraine, including photographers. And, if you look at today's paper, there are some very gripping stories and photography from Ukraine.
And let's look at some of these comments. Nikhil says, thank you, informative and enjoyable discussion. Great way to start the morning. Therese says, Tom, sending gratitude for your work and the work of the New York Times team. It truly takes a village.
Sri, you cut off Nikhil's comment. It's a great way to start the morning after Wordle.
Yes.
I just want to make sure we caught that.
And Therese says, sending gratitude for your work and work of the Times. And Natasha says, amazing show. Thanks, gracias. And Marilyn says, I visited the New York Times in 4th grade. They were still typesetting and the machines were amazing. Mike Connor shouts out the Yankees. That's for Neil. Jonathan says, wonderful show. Thank you. And Miriam says, I love how Tom praises so many of the people at the paper. I was struck by that as well. Every time, there's a third time that Tom has been with us, and he shares the praise very generously.
It does take a village, and I am just grateful every day at the talented people that I work with, and as I said earlier, the care and commitment to telling a story and getting it right. It's very, it's just, I feel blessed for that.
And we want to wish you, of course, a very happy Father's Day. Hope you you have a full day with the family, and looking forward to keeping in touch, Tom. Thank you very much, and good luck with everything you're doing.
Thank you both, and happy Father's Day to you all too. Hope you have a great day.
Thank you.
very much.
Right.
Bye
And we'll
bye,
see
everyone.
everybody 8:30 on Sunday with Amber Williams, editor of the New York Times for Kids.
Don't miss that.
Yeah.